How's it going, Bible Talk family? Welcome back to Bible Talk with BW, where we read scripture, we observe it, and we apply it to our lives. Today we're going to be going through Genesis 31, and we left off in Genesis 30, where Jacob ended up taking the rods from the different trees and sticking them in the water to make the cattle striped and spotted. If you guys missed that, you can go back and listen to it or just read it yourselves. But today we're in Genesis 31, and we're going to continue on in Jacob's story, where Jacob flees from Laban and Laban comes after him. And there's a lot in this, and I'll do my best to not make it too long, but um, it's a great chapter. And from here on, man, the stories are getting awesome. You know, the Bible just keeps getting more and more fun to go through from here on out, and I'm really excited to just continue forward. But that being said, let's get into Genesis 31. It says this: Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, "Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father." And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. So now we see some conflict coming. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, "I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me." It's so interesting that Jacob is going to his wives and talking about Laban, because what I noticed reading this is that Laban and Jacob are cut from the same cloth. You know, Jacob's name means guile, or heel snatcher. He was born literally holding on to his brother's heel, and he's a tricky guy. And Laban is the same way. And I find it interesting that, you know, so often we can notice other people's faults because they have the same faults that we have. And, you know, there's something about a genuinely nice person. You know, when you really come across a nice person, nice people don't recognize people's faults because they're so nice to people, and they just want to see the best in everybody. And that's what I strive to be. But, you know, I find myself, you know, even so subtly, you know, sin sniffing, or I can see faults in others at times where I have to correct myself. And maybe you guys have done that as well. But Jacob is pointing out the faults in his father-in-law, and yet Jacob is very similar. He does the same type of stuff that Laban does. And so he's complaining, but I'm sure, you know, you point a finger, you have 3 of them pointing back at you, right? If he said, "The speckled ones will be your wages," then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, "The streaked ones will be your wages," then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream. This is where Laban got this idea to take these rods and put them in the watering troughs and all that stuff. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, and spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, "Jacob." I answered, "Here I am." And I talked about this, you know, answering God when he calls you. And Jacob is a man who does things. He's a businessman. He likes to get out and work and make things happen. And God respects his ideas because he's working for God. He's obeying God, and he has an idea, and maybe it's not even a good idea, but God is going to respect it because he sees that he's working hard and he's being obedient. I answered, "Here I am." And he said, "Look up and see all that the male goats mating with the flocks are streaked and speckled or spotted, for I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land." So here we see, if you guys remember, at at Bethel, that's where Jacob had that encounter with God, where he had that dream where he was laying on that rock and he had the vision of angels ascending and descending. And he said, God is here. And that's where he was converted. That was his conversion. And then, if you remember, we saw after the conversion, he was a different person. He said, I'm going to give 10% of what I have. Which he's a business guy, he liked his stuff. So for him to say, I'm going to give 10%, that's a way that somebody is truly changed. He had a different step. It said he was skipping to where he was going. His whole walk was different. And you can tell when somebody's truly converted by the way they act, the way they talk, the way they give, and the way they move, the way they worship the Lord. And, he worshiped the Lord by building him that pillar. And he said, I'm going to give. And then he had a different walk, and those are three things that we can really know if we have been converted or if people around us are truly converted. It says, this verse 13, I'll read it again. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. So now his wives are agreeing, do we even have anything left here? Surely all the wealth that God took away from our fathers belongs to us and our children. So whatever God has told you, or so do whatever God has told you. And I really love this because, I'm going to mark it real quick. I really love this because oftentimes, myself included, or people around us, they want to know God's plan for your lives, or God's plan for my life. And I think this is a really good hint of how we can know that. You see, Jacob went to his wives and they had a conversation, and his wives were feeling sort of the same way, and they agreed with what Jacob was saying. There was no conflict in Jacob's plans. And so Jacob had a dream, and God respected his dream. Then God told him to go, and then he went to his wives, and they agreed, okay, yeah, I see this happening too. And so I think that's a big key to know what's next in our lives. If you have a dream, you go to people, they support you, they support your dream. You have a plan, where you want to be headed. I think that's a good indicator of, okay, maybe that's God's plan. And that's what I get out of this little section right here. Does he not regard us as foreigners? This is verse 15. Not only has he sold us, but I know I read this, I'm just reading it again. Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our fathers belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. I love that. You found a good wife when they agree, do what God tells you to do. I think back to my wife just making these videos. She went out, bought me a nice giant Bible so I can see the words on it from a distance away, and it's just supported me, and even has been on me about staying with the videos. Are you gonna do a video? Yeah, I will. And you have a good wife when they support what you feel God is telling you to do. Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. So now he's going back. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban, and see, here we go. Here's Jacob again, deceiver. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had across the Euphrates River and headed for the hill country of Gilead. On the third day, Laban was On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled, taking his relatives with him. He pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, "Be careful, do not say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." Sorry. God is telling him, hey, I see your intentions. I don't want you to come to him in anything good or bad, uh, which is good because I'm sure Laban didn't have good intentions with Jacob by any means. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relative camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You have deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps?" Which I don't think would have happened, but you know, oftentimes when you look back at something in your mind, you think that it would have went way differently than it actually would have. Maybe that's just me. I have a tendency to do this as well. Like, man, if you would have just said this, I could have done this for you and this for you. And in reality, maybe I wouldn't have done those things, but maybe I would have been more so offended if you took my grandchildren away, if I was a grandpa, or my kids, or whatever the case may be. You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you. But last night, the God of your father said to me, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods? I'm so glad we don't have gods that can be stolen away from us. Don't you? Our God is amazing and powerful and big and mighty. And and nobody can steal my God away, which is a great comfort. Jacob answered Laban, "I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force," which may have been the case. Laban is maybe known for being a little hot-headed, and gets what he wants, which, looking back when Jacob showed up and he was talking to the herdsmen, he asked if they knew Laban, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, we know Laban." So I mean, he had a little bit of reputation maybe for a temper or whatnot, But if you find anyone who has your gods, I'm going to read verse 31 again. Jacob answered Laban, "I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me. And if so, take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. Man, this is a great lesson right here, okay? So often, I have the tendency to think I know everything about a certain subject or what has happened, or I hear something and I'm quick to, tell people what I've learned or what I know. And oftentimes that's not the case. The Bible says we all see through glass we all see through glass muddy or darkly, if that's a word. Nobody sees the clear picture. And Jacob here the wording Jacob is using is such a strong wording that it's as if he's yelling, "Go ahead, go search through all my stuff, and if you find anything, I'll kill him." Like, that's how sure he is. But little did he know that his wife actually did take the gods. And man, that's a good lesson. I love the Bible because experience is the best teacher, but it doesn't have to be our experience. We get to learn from these stories. And Jacob here doesn't know the full story. And oftentimes we don't know the full story of what's going on. More often than not, especially with news stations and media and Facebook and social media and all that stuff. People can post whatever they want, and more times than not, we don't have the full story, and it can cause a lot of problems when we don't know the full story. People make assumptions, opinions, and they just attack each other, which we're seeing more and more, which is sad because it's causing a huge divide. But Jesus said, what we do in the dark will be, revealed in the light. When we stand before God, everything we've done in our life is going to be open and naked before the Lord. And he's the only one who knows everything, the whole story, what's going on. And so that's why he says just to love your neighbors. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbors. He doesn't say try to be right all the time. He doesn't say gossip or point fingers or point out people's flaws. And yet that's what our culture is turning into, is causing a divide and pointing at one another, which should not happen within the church. But here we see Jacob. He doesn't have the full story also. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period." So he searched but could not find the household gods. So now we see, not only did she steal these gods, but now she's lying about it. And at first I was thinking how primitive, of people to worship these type of gods, but it's no different then than it is today. They worshiped a god named Mammon, which is just money. We have our own gods here in our culture. We worship our bank account, our money. We worship our credit cards. We worship, the sex culture. It's getting out of control. They had a goddess of, fertility and all kinds of different gods, but we still have these gods. We just call them different things. It looks differently, but yet people still worship the same gods. And it's not that they were primitive. It's just that these entities have always been around, and they always will until Jesus comes back and to make things right. And things are going to get worse before they get better. The Bible makes that really clear. But thank goodness we have Jesus, and he came and he died for us so that we can be free from the bondage of sin and from those other gods. That we have the Lord. That's such a comfort for me. But here it says, Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. "What is my crime?" he asked Laban. "How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household?" And like when it says Jacob was angry, he was really angry. Put it here in front of your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the two of us. So now he's saying, he's doing the whole "I told you so" thing. He's acting like a child here, Jacob is. Trying to make him look bad. Again, he doesn't have the full story. His wife did steal the gods. But I have been with you for 20 years now. You gotta remember, he worked 7 years for what he thought was Rachel. And then he had to work another 7 years, but he got Leah, and then he had to work another 7 years for Rachel. And then he ended up working longer because Laban wanted him to stay because he saw that Jacob was blessed. So now he says, I've been with you for 20 years. Your sheep, your goats have not miscarried. Nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night? This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime, and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for the 20 years I was in your household. So now he's doing a guilt trip here. Ugh, I can't stand guilt trips. They don't work on me, for one, which maybe they should a little bit. I need to work on my compassion part, but guilt trips are, I just kind of roll my eyes at them. And I would have done the same thing here with Jacob, because he became a very wealthy man under Laban's care, and he's just complaining here. But I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you. Laban answered Jacob, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine, yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. So here, I've seen it used as like they come together, but it's not what's going on here. It's their deal is saying, if you cross this, you're going to be dead. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, gather some stones. So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jager, I'm Sahadutha. I think that's how you say it. Sorry, that's Sahadutha. And Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why it was called Gilead. It was also called Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. He's saying, yeah, hey, the Lord's watching, so you better not break this deal, or else. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. The fear of the Lord is an amazing thing, and that I feel like that's missing today in our church, in our culture, in our world. You know, we need to get back to the fear of the Lord, which we'll talk about when we get to Proverbs eventually. Laban also said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar I have set up between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and pillar to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their fathers, judge between us. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home. All right, that's Genesis 31. A lot of good stuff in there. And I'm sure there's stuff I could have went over more, but man, it's getting good. You know, Jacob prepares to meet Esau. We're going back. That's the next chapter, is Genesis 32. And yeah, it's going to get good. So appreciate your time, and stay tuned for Genesis 32. All right, until next time.